Miss Meyer with another episode of The Miss Meyer Show. And today we are going to be talking about early foreign policy. So get ready, because here it comes.
It's raining tacos from out of the sky.
On this stuff we already went over, so we're going to go over really, really fast. Because we have gone over it before in previous Miss Meyer shows, so you guys should pretty much know already what I'm talking about. So the first one we're going to talk about is the Proclamation of Neutrality of 1793. And this was a policy statement issued by George Washington after the American Revolution. And it declared... Excuse me. It declared that the U.S. would not take sides in a war between Great Britain and France. And because we did this, guys, because we were just simply not ready. We weren't. At this point, we did not have the military. We owed a serious debt to France. We didn't have the manpower. We didn't have a financial institution. We didn't even have a way to collect funds or taxes. So there was no way that we were going to do that. This proclamation was really important because it went against the Treaty of Alliance with France that we signed during the American Revolution, that when France was helping us out. Because basically they said, hey, yo, America, you help me, I help you. And America was like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Well, when push came to shove and France said, hey, America, we need your help, America said, no, not today. I'm sorry, I'm busy today. I'm washing my hair, you know. That's basically what America said. And this really, really hurt our relationship with America at the time. The next one we're going to talk about is Jay's Treaty of 1795. Now, this treaty with Great Britain ended the boundaries agreed upon at the Treaty of Paris in 1783 after the American Revolution. And Great Britain agreed to withdraw troops that were stationed in the Northwest Territory because America was not at that point what we think of today, from sea to shining sea. We were a third of what we have today. And in areas that America did not control, Great Britain still controlled some of it, especially in the Northwestern Territory, higher, in the Canadian Peninsula area. Well, once we signed Jay's Treaty, this removed them, sent them back to England, and made things a little more friendly for the Americans. The next one is Pinckney's Treaty of 1795, same year. Lots going on, y'all. We're a baby nation. 1776 is when this whole American Revolution thing got started. 1795, things are just going boom, 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 boom. This is in George Washington's presidency. And in this treaty, Spain agreed to allow American boats to sail on the Mississippi River and use the port of New Orleans without paying dues to Spain. If you guys remember, during the French and Indian War, France and the Native Americans fought against Great Britain. American people, colonists, we fought on the side of Great Britain. So when France lost the war, they had to give a lot of their territory over to Great Britain. They didn't want to give up New Orleans. They didn't want to give up that mouth of the Mississippi River. So rather than give it to Great Britain, they had given it to their buddy Spain. Well, even though Spain was in control, they really left all the decision-making up to France. They were the ones that made all the big decisions. And with Pinckney's Treaty of 1795, Spain had given the new United States of America the ability to sail on the Mississippi and to use the port of New Orleans without paying dues to Spain, because Spain saw the United States, these patriots, as being friends of France, because, they did work together during the American Revolution. So a friend of France was a friend of Spain, basically. That's what they were thinking. And they also established the border between Georgia and Spanish-controlled Florida, because Florida at the time is not what we think of today. On a personal note, I love Orlando. I sometimes watch YouTube videos of people just walking around Disney World with GoPro cameras. So every time I see the word Florida, I think Disney World, and it makes me sad because I really want to go back. Anyway, so it did establish that border between Georgia and Florida. Next thing is President Washington's farewell address in 1796. Remember, G-Dog, y'all, they wanted him to be like the king of America. They wanted him to have this reigning, be president until he died. But George was the one that really established that precedent of having term limits for the presidency. And decided that after 2 terms, he is gone. He's going back to Mount Vernon. He's going to be a farmer. He's going to, live there with Martha and his grandchildren and have a happy life and not worry about any of this. So before leaving office, at the end of his 2nd term as president, George wrote a letter to the American people. This is before YouTube. I know, what can you imagine? That must just blow your mind before YouTube, right? This is before the internet. This is before cell phones, text messages, TV, any of that. So he wanted to address his people. So he wrote something, some of you may not know what it's called. It's called a letter. Just joking. Okay. And in this letter, he had advice for how the country should be run. And it is known as George Washington's farewell address. Now, one of Washington's main points, it dealt with U.S. foreign policy. And like I had said before, the United States was a little baby nation. We did not have the ability to go and fight with war. We didn't even have a concise constitution at this point of time. We had no way to collect taxes to pay for things. We didn't have an established military. We didn't even have, the White House wasn't even built. There was no Congress. There was so much infighting at this point. It was just not feasible for America to enter into any kind of foreign, skirmish with another country. And George Washington warned that the U.S. should not enter into any long-term agreements with other countries because he knew that, we're friends with France right now, but the time may come when we will not be. And, think about that. I mean, Great Britain was, our number one enemy at this time and for a long time afterwards. But during the 1900s, World War I, World War II, and even to today, we couldn't find a bigger ally. So he warned the country to avoid foreign wars that had absolutely nothing to do with the United States. And that was really good advice that we heeded even during things like World War I and World War II. America did not want to get involved at first, and we're going to talk about that much later. But it was on the advice of George Washington. A lot of people, American colonists, and even today, you still have people like that, which is great. I'm proud to be an American too, but I am a realist. I don't believe that America can just go jump into any kind of war and we're going to automatically be the winner. But, there were people, colonists out there, that were so excited that we had just won our independence that they thought, let's go and take over the rest of the world. When in all reality, that would have been like the end of us. And even today, you still have people like that. I live in Texas, and there are a lot of people that would like Texas to be an independent country once again. And they think, Texas, we can do it. We can be our own country. We will do this. No, we couldn't. We would be taken over immediately. It would be a horrible idea. And George Washington was one of the people who really decided that really cautioned us against that. Okay, the next one is called the XYZ Affair of 1797, and this is when John Adams was president. Now, John Adams at this time, he won the presidency pretty, it was kind of, a toss-up. Not a lot of people liked John Adams. George Washington was pretty popular and was pretty much handed the presidency. John Adams was not as popular. George Washington was this tall, handsome man with a commanding personality. Even though he had disgusting false teeth. It was just gross. They still liked George. George had the false teeth, not John. John had pretty nasty teeth too, but at least they were his own. John Adams just was not as likable as George Washington, and a lot of people did not like him. Okay? Well, when he became president, the U.S. and Great Britain were trying to have some sort of peace. They were trying to heed the warning of George Washington, and they signed something called the Jay Treaty. Well, France had feared that the U.S., when they found out that this was going on, they were very, very fearful that the U.S. was forming an alliance with Great Britain. Remember, France hated Great Britain, and that originally was one of the reasons that they agreed to help us in the first place. I have this big piece of gum in my mouth. I have to get rid of it. Sorry. They had agreed to help us, after they had saw that we were actually doing a decent job. They had agreed to, help us out. Well, when they saw that we were now becoming some kind of alliance and having a little bit of a better relationship with Great Britain, they became extremely fearful. And they started seizing U.S. ships. Okay, seizing means taking them over. So if France saw a United States ship, somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean or near the Gulf of Mexico, around that area, they were going to take it. They just took it. Well, this angered the United States in 1797. So the United States sent diplomats to France in order to negotiate peace between the two countries. To basically say, there's no reason for this to go on. We can't have this fighting. Now, some of you might say, hey, why did they go in there and just, have a all-out war? Well, we were not ready. We could not do that. If we would do that, we'd be decimated. We didn't have the ability to do it. So the French demanded, when we went there, they demanded that the U.S. pay a bribe of $250,000. And at that time, even today, $250,000 is a lot of money. But at that time, it was a really lot of money. And then also, France wanted to loan France some money. They wanted a bribe and they wanted money. Well, the Americans said, you want us to give you what? We don't even have an ability to collect the taxes. This is just right when the basic constitution was being written. We didn't have any of that. There was so much infighting between the states. We didn't have that kind of money. So John Jay was, I'm wrong. Okay, so John Adams refused, of course, and John Adams refused, of course, and he sent a report to Congress using the letters X, Y, and Z to stand for the French agent's name. Instead of writing their names, he put X, Y, and Z. Now, this event became known as the XYZ affair, and it angered the American government. They were so upset, and they said, how dare France do this? Who do they think they are? And it just got a lot of flack. And John Adams got a lot of flack as well from the American people because he did not go to war. A lot of the Americans felt that this was war talk and we should go to war with France. And they called John Adams weak and unable to do a good job as a president. They called him all kind of horrible stuff, y'all. This, like really bad stuff, even in today's, standards. It made him very unpopular and probably contributed to the loss of the election in the coming years for him. But as a result, the United States began to increase its defense spending. We did see, great, let's go to war with France, but we saw that there was not enough financial support or the supplies needed to go to war against a major country like France. So the upset of the XYZ affair and the issues that we were having with France and people demanding war and John Adams saying, no, we just can't go, it really, really, really brought forward to the attention of the American people that we really needed some sort of federal funding for a military. And the United States began to increase its defense spending. As before, we were barely collecting enough in taxes to kind of function the central government. But once the XYZ affair happened, really people started to pay attention and say, hey, we really need to do something about our military. And we started to get defense spending. And with this increase in defense spending, we created the Navy Department and we started building up the Army. Remember, this is the time before tanks, the time before planes, and all these other kinds of military, I guess, whatever, weaponry, okay? The main form of fighting was done in ships. So, our first real military department to really be kind of officially built up was the Navy, because that was going to build up our ships to patrol our shores. So, although that there was never a formal declaration of war, signed by Congress, the U.S. Armed Forces did increase as a result of this, making it a big deal. The Convention of 1880 is also known as the Treaty of Montefontaine. And if I'm saying that wrong, please somebody correct me. Okay, this was a meeting between the U.S. and France. So the two countries, they ended the alliance that they had formed in 1778, in which the country had agreed to help us. We were asking for their help in the American Revolution. So basically this convention ended the undeclared naval war between U.S. and France that had been going on from the XYZ affair. This basically said, okay, the playing field is now leveled. We are no longer agreeing to have this alliance to help you if something goes wrong, and we are no longer going to steal your ships. We are on equal playing field. We are clearing the slate. Let's forget about everything and start over. Okay? That's basically what the Convention of 1800 did. The Louisiana Purchase, this is like a big, y'all should know this like the back of your hand, right? This is when President Thomas Jefferson, this is after Adams, there's Washington and Adams, and then there's Jefferson. So Thomas Jefferson sent James Monroe and... Did y'all ever wonder what Mr. Meyer looks like? Come over here. Come here. Did you ever wonder what Mr. Meyer looks like? Let me just give you a little glimpse of what Mr. Meyer looks like. Mr. Meyer, remember we live in Dallas, and he is going to Little Caesars to get some pizza, and this is how he dresses. Come here. Come in front of the camera. Come over. Come in. Oh, he's going to come on the other side. Nope, here he comes. Come see the camera. Come say hello. That's Mr. Meyer. That's just... Okay, have fun. Give me some crazy bread. All right. So, realizing that it was becoming increasingly difficult to defend the area against the British, because remember, all of that land that included the Louisiana Purchase was owned by France. So, realizing that it was really hard to defend all this land, Napoleon, who was now in control of France, King Louis, who was our buddy during the American Revolution, he's gone. He was dead. They killed him. They cut off his head, and they cut off his wife's head too. They starved his child in prison. The Robespierre, I'm getting way ahead of myself, but long story short, let me give you this little information. Okay, so France at this time, let me go get my toys. Hold up. So let's pretend, we're going to say, we got some little babies here. They kind of all look alike to me. All these little babies. So we are going to pretend that this baby, it's a cute little hat. We're going to pretend that this one here is Napoleon. So we're going to say that this baby's Napoleon, right here. And this baby is King Louis. Okay? Well, King Louis, and we'll pretend that this one is Marie Antoinette. So King Louis and Marie Antoinette, even though these are twins, we're going to pretend that they're, a husband and wife. Okay, so Marie Antoinette and King Louis are the rulers of France. Well, they are all about pretty much, they had given a lot of money to America. The wealthy, the upper class of France was doing awesome. I mean, they were making lots of money. They were living this wonderful life, blah, 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 blah. Where the poor of France were like, we're hungry. We just want some bread. We're so hungry. Well, Marie Antoinette, even though she never did say this, she never said this, the people did not like her. So they started putting rumors about her all over France. And one of the rumors was that she said, let them eat cake, which she never, ever, ever said that. That is so false. That's a lie. Well, that didn't help her popularity, and the people of France liked her even less. And they didn't even like Louis. So they really disliked them a lot. Well, this guy named Robespierre, he became very, rose up in the ranks. He was kind of like, not extremely wealthy, not a member of the upper elite class of France. And he really got a lot of people behind him. Well, he got enough people to, kind of like support him and his cause that they stormed a big fortress where France had kept all of its armory and gunpowder and things like that, called the Bastille. Well, they stormed the Bastille, they took all of this weaponry, and eventually they were able to knock King Louis and Marie Antoinette off the French throne. And they put them on trial. They said that they had done horrible things to the people of France, blah, 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 blah. Well, poor King Louis, that's Napoleon, poor King Louis and Marie Antoinette, they were marched to the guillotine. They put their head, not together, they went individually. Louis went first. They would put their heads on the guillotine like this, and the big sword would go and cut their heads off, and they would hold them up and show them to the crowds. They did that to Louis. They did that to Marie Antoinette. They had 2 children at the time. Their son, he was pretty much starved to death in prison, and only their daughter, Maria Therese, was sent away and lived her days in exile. But after this, after Louis is gone and he is no longer king of France, and Marie Antoinette is gone as well, a new person rises to power. And that new person is called Napoleon Bonaparte. And Napoleon becomes this big guy over in France. Now, Napoleon he's kind of small, he's pretty, even for those standards. But he's really just a brilliant military commander, and he becomes the head guy in France. He even crowns himself emperor. He kind of sees himself as this modern day, for his time, Julius Caesar, and becomes the emperor and ruler of France. Well, when he becomes the emperor and the ruler of France, he acquires the land that was once, Louis and Marie Antoinette's. And part of that land was now, the area of the Louisiana Purchase. Spain had given it back to France after the American Revolution. They didn't want it anymore, and it was never really theirs to begin with. So France now had all of this land. Well, boom, guess who they go to war with? France absolutely hates Great Britain. And Napoleon here, he decides that he wants to take over the world. He wants to rule everything. So he decides he's going to really just go against Great Britain and just knock them out, because he's going to be able to do it. Well, during this time, Thomas Jefferson is noticing that America is getting bigger and bigger, and more and more people are coming here, and they want to move west. They want to increase the land that the United States has, and there was a huge chunk of land around the area of Louisiana. We did not originally go to Napoleon. We didn't say, hey, Napoleon, we want all this land. That is not what we did not, that was not part of our original deal. When we went there, Livingston and Monroe went to France to negotiate just the purchase of the port of New Orleans. That's it. That's all we wanted. We didn't want this huge section, okay? But when we got there, first Napoleon didn't want to see us. He said, I don't want to see him. Go away. Well, after a while, Napoleon decided that he did want to see Livingston and Monroe. And not only was he willing to sell them, the port of New Orleans, but he was going to sell them a land stretching from the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains for $15 million. Well, Livingston and Monroe, they were just floored. They were like, we can't pass this up. We cannot. And this is the day before text messaging and cell phones and email and Skype and all of this. And how were they going to get, and he said, you need to make this decision and make it now. There was no way that they were going to be able to get to Jefferson in time. So Livingston and Monroe took it upon themselves to tell Napoleon, oui, monsieur, which means yes, sir. We will take all the land. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup. And Napoleon said, make it so. Any Star Trek fans in here? Nobody Star Trek, y'all know what Captain Picard would always say? Make it so, number one. I told you guys, I'm a big nerd, okay? I like that kind of stuff. Although I don't like Star Wars, but I do like a little bit of my Star Trek, must say. Well, anyways, so Napoleon was like, make it so, okay? And Livingston and Monroe go back to America, and Thomas Jefferson says, okay, so what happened? Tell me what happened. And they said, all right, we got the port of New Orleans. And he's like, yes. But we've also got all this other land too. And it's $5 million more. We said you'd do it. Well, this is something that's unprecedented because Thomas Jefferson did not have the authority to do that. In order to purchase all this extra land, in order to spend all this extra money, he was going to have to get consent from Congress, and he did not do that. He did not. He just had these people, two of his guys just said, sure, sounds like a great idea. Well, Jefferson said, okay, well, I'm just going to have to go and ask for forgiveness. So he went over to Congress and he said, hey guys, I know that there's a problem because the Constitution that we have, the Constitution pretty much governed the United States. It did not specifically grant the president the power to buy land from a foreign country. Livingston and Monroe went there to really negotiate a deal, not to say, yes, we're going to do this. So Jefferson went to Congress and he explained the whole situation, and Congress said, it's all right. Sounds like it's all right. But in all actuality, that was totally against our Constitution. The whole Louisiana Purchase was against our Constitution. It truly was. The Embargo Act of 1807 prohibited American exports to all foreign ports. Now, this act was the U.S. hoped that it would keep them out of the war between Great Britain and France, because this was just like a major war raging at this time. Great Britain and France were two major countries. America was not one yet, and they were in this battle for number one status, and America was kind of caught in the middle. France was angry if we gave Great Britain any of our materials. Great Britain was angry if we gave France any of our materials. And we were trying to follow the principles set by George Washington to not get involved in any kind of foreign skirmish. Well, this act truly hurt America. It really did. We had hoped that this act would keep us out of the war between Great Britain and France, but it ended up hurting American businesses, and it was eventually lifted in favor of the Non-Intercourse Act. And this act allowed American exports to Great Britain, except it allowed all American exports to go to other countries, with the exception of France and Great Britain. A lot of American money was being made by selling supplies and selling items to other countries. We had an amazing crop, especially in the southern colonies, of indigo, of cotton, of sugar, of tobacco. All of those things we made money on. We sold to other countries. And with this Embargo Act that said we could not sell to foreign lands, it really hurt America. And by having America not be able to make that money, that meant that we were not able to pay our taxes to our country because we did not have the money. So America said, it doesn't sound like a good idea. We're going to have to go and, maybe change things up a bit. And that's when they decided, okay, you can go and sell to foreign countries except Great Britain and France. The War of 1812 we've discussed already. It should be really big in your mind, especially because the Battle of New Orleans, y'all, that happened during this war. And I'm from Chalmette, proud Chalmatian down in the parish. Well, the Battle of New Orleans was fought in Chalmette, and it was really probably the battlefield in Araby, which is where it still is. You go visit it today. It was probably one of my favorite running destinations because I'm a marathoner. Oh yeah. And so I train, and my training, I would love to train at the battlefield because it was just straight stretch of land, and it was perfect. Well, anyways, the War of 1812 was a war between the United States and Great Britain, and the whole reason that we went to war was because Great Britain started pretty much kidnapping American sailors, and we called it impressment. Impressment is the official term, but really impressment just means kidnapping. And they would force these American sailors to serve on British ships. Also, Great Britain started to blockade the American coast, wouldn't let us get out, wouldn't let us go do business with other countries. It really interfered with American trade, and they started to aid Native Americans in America, saying, hey, if you go and fight against these colonists, we'll support you. You want to go and you see them? They're trying to take over all your land. You see them? All this land they acquired with the Louisiana Purchase, they're trying to take your land. You better go do something about it. Well, this was the deal. Ever since the beginning of America and our colonies, Great Britain and France had very different relationships with the Native Americans. And that was really why France fought alongside the Native Americans in the French and Indian War. Well, in France, you see, let's go back. Saved by the Bell reference, how they always would go, whatever. All right, so let's go back to the very beginning of how America got started. Well, when we first got started, when France and England were coming here and establishing territories, well, America was not just your base. People were already living here. This wasn't just, land with no one here. People were living here for generations. Native Americans were here for generations. So here come, the British and the French. Well, they had very different ways of dealing with the Native Americans who were already here. Well, let's just say this baby here is British, and this baby here is a Native American. Well, this is how it went down. Hello, my name is John, Smith, and I'm from Great Britain. This is my land now. Take it over. That's just where I went. Okay, so let's pretend that this baby is French. Bonjour, monsieur. My name is Jacques Smith. I am here. I'd like to do some business with you. Let's trade. Okay, I will take your beads, and here's some of our stuff, and we're going to kind of work together and try to find some sort of way of having peace. We're friends. Okay, so when France had all this land, that they had control of, they had given it to us, well, really not given it, sold it to us, in the Louisiana Purchase. So now America had control over it. Well, the Native Americans who had always done business with France were used to the way France was dealing with things, and they were used to kind of having a partnership, more or less, with France. So now that the United States owned all this land, they were really scared. They really didn't know how this was going to play out. You need to remember, during the French and Indian War, the colonists of the United States fought against against France and the Native Americans. So they really didn't have a favorable idea of, dealing with these Americans. Well, Britain used that to their advantage. They started going and speaking to the Native American tribe leaders and saying, hey, now that the colonies are in control, you can kiss that relationship, that partnership that you had with France, goodbye. But if you want to help us by going and destroying, Americans and villages and stuff, we are all behind you. We are totally behind you. And the British started telling the Native Americans if they would aid them in, attacking the villages and getting land back, once they had won the War of 1812 and acquired the land back that, they had lost during the American Revolution, they would give what was taken away from the Native Americans back to them, which was probably not true, but that's what was going down. So all of this was happening. They were reasons that we went into the War of 1812. The U.S. declared war on Great Britain on June 18th of 1812, and the president at this time was James Madison. Now, the war's going on, there's all kinds of stuff happening, and it becomes pretty clear that it's just going to continue to go on. Battles were being fought. No one was really making a ton of headway. It really wasn't. But if you want to put, stack the battles to one another, America really is winning. This is also a war that we start to see in Louisiana. A lot of people really rising to prominent power. Louisiana, the Mississippi River, that is really a big point, because that is like where people, if the British were coming, and the way that they were going to go and enter into the United States was they were going to go enter in through New Orleans to go up the Mississippi River. Well, Madison sent one of his generals, Andrew Jackson, down to Louisiana to try and fortify and get these people ready. Because the people of Louisiana, the problem at this time was that the majority of people in Louisiana did not even see themselves as Americans. The people of Louisiana considered themselves still to be French. And some of them were French, some of them were Spanish, some of them were Creole, some of them were Canary Islanders. These people, it was like a serious gumbo. A lot of times people in Louisiana, and especially New Orleans, couldn't even communicate with one another because they all spoke different languages. So Madison at this time was like, how am I ever going to get this to work? The French are going to come right up the Mississippi River, and the people of New Orleans are going to say, come on in, bienvenidos, welcome, come. So he sent Jackson over there. Jackson went to Louisiana, New Orleans, with his wife, Rachel. Rachel opens up her eyes. She goes, I am not staying here. She called New Orleans Sodom and Gomorrah and left. She's like, I cannot be here. No way. Well, Jackson went to New Orleans, and he's like, this is crazy. This is crazy. He instituted martial law. The people of New Orleans hated him. I mean, he was forcing them to do things. He made them go inside. He stopped the drinking in the street, all kinds of stuff, because he knew that he had to get this place ready. He really did. Also, this is when Jean Lafitte, the pirate, really helped us out at this time, because he pretended to be Britain's friend and started coming and telling us what's going on. So, a lot of stuff, because, there's no real headway being made. And in December 24th, Christmas Eve of 1814, in Ghent, Belgium, the Treaty of Ghent had brought an end to the War of 1812. Neither the U.S. nor Great Britain claimed a victory, and neither of them gained or lost really any territory as a result of this treaty. So it basically said, okay, let's start fresh. Let's just say this war is over. Let's just forget about it. Well, here's the thing. Like I said before, there is no internet. There's no cell phones. There's no way that they can communicate with one another. So on January 8th, a couple of weeks later, big battle happens. Even though the war is already over, no one had been able to get in contact with Andrew Jackson. Slow communication across the Atlantic Ocean meant that the British and the American troops did not know that the Treaty of Ghent had been signed, and they continued to fight. And on January 8th of 1815, the last battle of the War of 1812 was fought after the war was already over. And this is the one that's in Chalmette, pretty much Araby. So the General Andrew Jackson, he led the Americans to an overwhelming victory in the Battle of New Orleans against the British. I mean, like, if you go to the battlefield in Araby, you can, like, there's a museum and everything. I mean, the British lost an intense amount of men. The Americans did not lose hardly nearly as much as the British did. But there was a lot of casualties that needed not even die because the war was already fought. The war was already over. The Adam-Onis Treaty of 1819 was signed by Spain and the United States. And in this treaty, the U.S. had purchased Florida from Spain and set the border between Texas and Louisiana. Spain withdrew at this time. Remember, Texas is still part over there, dealing their own thing with Mexico. Spain withdrew all claims to land in the west, north of the 42nd parallel. That's all west, which... Okay, if I'm looking at you, so my west is your east. So if I want to say west, we'll say that way. There you go. All land west of the 42nd parallel. And the U.S. also said, okay, we're going to do this. And by giving us all this land, because remember, Spain was probably the third biggest empire. There was Great Britain, then France, then Spain. Well, America, we had already defeated Great Britain in the War of 1812, and we had already proved, because that we were stronger than Napoleon. Napoleon was just like dwindling at this point, truly dwindling. So Spain knew, you don't mess with, America might be something that you're not going to want to mess with. So they said, okay, you take it all. Go ahead. We're going to deal with what we got on our own. We're just, you go ahead, you take it. Well, America said, okay, thank you. Thank you for giving it to us. We promise that we will pay any damages that, the U.S. has caused to any, against any citizen of Spain, anything like that. Because remember in Louisiana, I told you guys this, I don't know if you remember, but when Spain had sent governors to Louisiana to govern after France had given, Louisiana to Spain after the French and Indian War, the people of Louisiana were livid. They were like, I am not Spanish, I am French. And they did all kind of terrible things to the poor Spanish governor. Well, the United States said, once they had now acquired this land from Spain, they said, hey, you know what, thanks for giving us this land. We promise we're going to pay for any damages that any American citizens may have caused to a Spanish official. And that amount was about $5 million of damages. Okay? The last thing we're going to talk about is the Monroe Doctrine of 1823. And President James Monroe announced what was known as the Monroe Doctrine in his annual message to Congress in 1823, kind of like his State of the Union address. So Monroe asserted that this policy, shortly after Latin American countries started to gain their independence from Spain. So he feared that the European nations would try to take control over the newly independent countries. And it stated that the European countries would no longer be allowed to create new colonies or to interfere with the affairs of the independent nations in the Western Hemisphere. Basically saying, leave us alone. Just leave us alone. The Monroe Doctrine was very influential on U.S. foreign policy for much of the 19th and the 20th centuries, and it was actually even used as justification for U.S. involvement in the affairs of various countries of Latin America in the 20th century. Okay, so it was basically saying, the Monroe Doctrine was saying, leave these little countries alone. Because now, remember, Europe at this time had three major empires that were trying to take over everything, which is what was going on in the United States too before the American Revolution. France, England, and Spain were trying to become massive empires. And after the American Revolution, we start seeing more revolutions pop up. Little countries that used to be part of the Spanish Empire, countries that used to be part of the French Empire or the Kingdom of Great Britain, were now breaking away and forming their own countries. And with the Monroe Doctrine, we basically said, you big countries, Spain, France, and Great Britain, you leave these independent countries alone. If you go and mess with them, I can't promise you what's going to happen. And this is when America starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So the Monroe Doctrine basically said, leave the little bitties alone. Leave them alone. That's what happened. That's all I've got for you this time, guys. I will see you again later on this week on the Miss Meyer Show. Woo! Bye.
Everybody was kung fu fighting. Those kids were fast as lightning. In fact, it was a little bit frightening, but they fought with